there's a blooper or something. And you'll obviously have a chance to have a look at it and see if there's anything that you want to remove. So hello and welcome to another podcast. I'd like to welcome Mike Martins, a very well-known inspector in Halifax and actually Nova Scotia, because you travel almost anywhere as well. I've had the privilege of working with Mike on a number of jobs. I think we've been in the trenches together. We actually, like literally, we got to an inspection one day, and I had unfortunately forgotten to ask them to uncover the septic tank. So Mike and I, we got stuck in. So really, Mike, going the extra mile. It's my pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you.
And I think a lot of people would love to know a little bit about you. Tell us about you. How long have you been here? Tell us about the business. Why did you start Ace Tech Home Inspections?
Yeah, I know, right? There's not a lot about me out there. I'm like a semi-private
You're very private
person.
guy.
Yeah. I know. Sometimes I want to post on that. I don't want to post on that. So, but I've been here since 2016, and it's interesting how I got here. That's probably a story for another day. But those who know me,
Yes,
you might know how I got into Canada. Anyways, I got into Canada, and then I was working for IBM. So I did work for IBM.
for IBM.
Yes, yeah. IBM Canada for 4 years. I did do a lot of techie
That's
stuff.
right. You told me you were in information technology for a while.
Yeah, I did some IT engineering. I
yeah.
used to build big DCs. So I will build DCs as big as this building, put tons of big servers
Data
in
centers.
there. Correct,
Yeah.
data centers. But I was always that type of guy who knew how to do a lot of stuff. So as a kid, I was very dexterous. I used to do a lot of stuff. And then I figured out that my strength was learning. So I really always used to flout my strength. I would be like, I want to do something else. And in no time, I was like flying. So I think I bought my first property in 2018.
First property 2018 in Canada.
So I was kind of like, at that point in my career where I was like, I kind of know it. Like, I need a new challenge. So, and then I do have engineering background. So I do have a master's in industrial engineering and first degree in electronics, electrical, computer engineering.
Okay.
So at that point in time, I was like, what can I do? So he came through, he checked a couple stuff, and I was walking around with him, and I looked at myself, I'm like, I could totally do this. I know electricity. I know all the stuffs, like,
Yeah.
was doing already, because I used to do some of that stuff back home. Back home, too, I had a side business. I used to repair ECMs for cars. So I used to...
What is an ECM?
Electronic control module. So it's
Okay.
like the brain box. People call
Right.
it brain box.
Okay.
So at the time, cars were a little bit simpler. So then I'll open it up, and then I'll check the
Yeah.
ICs, the integrated circuits, check the logic gates, and
Okay.
just try to fix basic problems of signals to different components of the powertrain and all that kind of stuff. So I said, I can do this. So then I had friends saying, go do your own business, go do it. Because in the workplace, like, I always wanted to fly. Like,
Yeah.
when you're here, I want to be there. Like, so my friends are like, just do your thing. So I said, you know what? I could totally do this. I could try it. And then
Your friend was in home inspections.
no, like my friends generally who knew me from back home and even here,
Right.
who knew my personality, was like,
Okay.
just you do you. So they were kind of like,
Yeah. And you wanted to go into business for yourself.
Yes.
So it didn't really matter the type of business, but it had to be something that
Correct.
you could use your hands, have an interest in,
Correct.
and perhaps draw on the experience and the qualifications that you already
correct. I
had.
had tried to buy an automobile shop, funny enough, before
An
I started.
automobile.
Yes.
Okay.
At the time, I was broke. So it was
It's all the
400K
broke guys
then.
going around buying the stuff.
It was 400K then. I wanted to buy this automobile shop. It was 400K that I still want to buy one. I might still buy one. It was 400K. Then I didn't have the money. So that's how I pivoted and said, maybe this home inspection, it looks like it's a little bit less money to get into. The thing about home inspections is it was more investment here
Yeah.
than here. So that's how I was able to get in. All I needed to really do was improve this and then a little bit of this.
Yeah.
But for the automobile business, it was more of this.
I think what I from getting to know you, you are an entrepreneur.
Thank you.
You are. You look for business opportunities where they can be found, and I think going into home inspections it's probably the best one for building the kinds of contacts that you need to further the types of entrepreneurial business that you've got going. So, like with you've got a great interest in property.
That's right.
And acquiring properties.
That's right.
So building connections with realtors and, sort of having your finger on the pulse of what's going on in the real estate market.
That's right.
The home inspections isn't just home inspections; it's also a gateway to to access
100%.
to this whole market.
That's what it turned out to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So who's to say that you have to do a 9 to 5 for the rest of your life? You can do a bit of this and a bit of that, and keep it in your sphere of interest.
I'm just a people have referred to me as a hustler. My friends were like,
only when you're
real talk friends were like, bro, yeah, I'm just a go-getter. Let's put it that way. I've always been that type of kid. Like, just do it.
That's the thing with running your own business. You need to be able to motivate yourself to get up every day and go do that. There's nobody checking to see if you're clocking in.
Correct.
You could decide to sit on the couch for the day.
True that.
And you're not going to do any business and make any money that way. But you've got to motivate. It's actually harder running your own business because 100%. You're accountable to you.
100%. That's way harder.
For all of that. And it's a little bit scary because, or at least initially when you're getting set up and you're still trying to find clients, because you don't know what your monthly paycheck's going to be.
That's right.
So it's running your own business is overcoming that fear of, it takes a lot of strong will to be able to overcome that fear and then continue to succeed at that.
100%.
Right? And you get out, you motivate yourself every day, and you just keep doing the do until it succeeds.
Sounds like you know all about it.
I did run an IT business a couple of years back as well.
Yeah?
Yeah. So we can definitely have a conversation about the IT.
You can rehire me.
I can't hire you. You can hire me.
I can work. I can do so many stuff.
Fair enough. Maybe that's another side business.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a whole nother conversation. We can actually do another podcast on that one. So, Mikey, coming back to the inspection business and inspections, you and I have had some very interesting conversations.
Right.
Some of them have been on site, and some of them have been general conversations about things you've discovered on inspection sites. So, when you're doing home inspections, there are quite a few things that you check. I've noted down a few of them, and I really just want to hand this over to you. Right. So I'm going to mention what they are, and then perhaps you could tell us about the importance of each item, maybe things that homeowners should watch out for.
Correct.
So our very first one, I've combined these together because it's got to do with the way a home seals. Windows and roof, those two items. What are the main things you would look for when doing a home inspection, and what would you caution clients against when inspecting those two items?
I think the bottom line for windows or even home inspections generally is expenditure. It's what I find the clients get concerned about is, do I have to spend money or do I not? And sometimes there are different factors. Sometimes it's look and feel, aesthetics. Do I like how this house looks or how these windows make the house look?
Right.
Or number two, windows bring in light to the house. It's a requirement by the building code. You need at least 15% of every room to be naturally lit. So
15% has to be natural light.
So you need them. They must be there. So, and fortunately, windows bring in natural light. But unfortunately, that's your weakest area of the house in terms of R value, in terms of resistance to the weather. You know where we are. But right here in Canada, it gets to minus 15, gets to minus. It fluctuates. Windows, fenestrations, they call them fenestrations. Windows and doors are your weakest area. And why do I bring that up? Because that's where you have what? Your losses, your energy loss. And what's expensive to make, you and I know, is heat.
Yes.
So I spend all that money, electric heat. You know how much Nova Scotia Power charges now?
It's crazy.
Per kilowatt of energy, whatever. So I spend that money however you do it, heat pumps, electric baseboard, oil, however. I make that heat, and I want it to stay in. I want to keep the heat in. One of the factors is your window. So in the end, so if I have a window that doesn't do that really well, that's money. If I have a window that doesn't look good, that I don't like it, I might have to replace it.
Yeah.
That's money. So the importance of windows comes in terms of how they look and how they hold the heat. So it depends. If you have old wood windows, now we're talking about what? Maintenance. We're talking money again.
Yeah.
So how much do I have to maintain these windows? Do I have to paint every year? Or is it even in a state that it needs to go? So that's how it ties to the home. So I always say that there's a property for everybody. And you real estate guys, you guys always price it accordingly anyways. You guys know this thing. So how the house looks and all the windows look, you price it accordingly. So but for a home buyer, I find that they're more concerned in terms of how does it hold the heat? How does it look?
Yeah.
Do I have to maintain it? And everybody likes vinyl windows.
Everybody likes
they're
the
MF,
vinyl
they're
windows,
maintenance free.
Yeah.
You don't have to
Yeah.
do anything. And in terms of roof, that's usually the first question I get from buyers. How does the roof
They
look?
always ask about the roof.
But funny enough, I always smile because sometimes if I were to buy a property, I look at the roof, but roof usually doesn't form the major component for me because it's like a hat that I'm wearing.
Yeah.
I could take it off and I could put it on. It's one of the easier things to replace in the house. So sometimes when buyers are going crazy about the roof, I'm like, chill. That's one thing you can replace more easily than when you have problems like foundation. But what does a roof do? A roof makes sure that your house, at least one of the components, makes sure that your house stays dry. Things have generally increased these days. Like a project you wanted to do in 2020, you're trying to do it now, prices have at least tripled. So if you have to do a roof replacement, we're talking the average 1,000 square feet or footprint house, you're talking maybe $8,000 now.
Yeah.
So you really want to think about how that roof, there's different types of roof. I wish I could talk about roof in a simplistic form, but there's nothing simple about home inspection. There are at least like 6 different roofs, different way to apply them, different performance metrics, different maintenance procedures. And it can really, and that's where the knowledge really comes from. It's never really straightforward in any single component in the house. But if you have the serviceable roof, you want to know that for X amount of years that I don't have to do anything, and then my house stays dry from a roof perspective. So windows, roof, sometimes it just comes down to the dollar.
To the dollar value. Just on the roofs, a question we often get is how old is the roof? And the seller very often doesn't always know the age of the roof. So you as a home inspector, you'll come in. I know you have a drone that you like to send up. Sometimes I guess you'll go up on the ladder if you need to get a closer look. How do you sort of eyeball it or determine the age of the roof in the absence of sort of an invoice or something to show when the roof was last done?
I mean, this is where my engineering and science background. So in year two engineering, they always teach you science of material and strength of material. They just basically try to teach you how materials behave. So in my head, I have all these multiple matrices going on. I know how the weather behaves. I know how the weather swindles left and right. So
and you've been doing this for long enough, right?
I have.
Yeah.
This is 20.
How long have you been doing this?
I actually started unofficially in 2019, and then I incorporated my business in 2020.
Yeah.
So materials tend to react. So first of all, I'm asking myself, what's the material base? Is it bitumen base? Bitumen base is like a tire. It's like your winter tire. Like if you're good with cars, if you know a winter tire that could do 1 or 2 more seasons, you know when you see it, you see it. You look at the treads and you look at the composition of the material, what type of tire it is. So I'm also looking at the roof. Do I have a rolled-on roof? Do I have the torch? Do I have a TPO adhered? Do I have asphalt shingles? What type of asphalt shingles do I have? These days, 3-tab shingles, everyone pretty knows how much they last.
What are the 3 types?
3-tab shingles.
A 3-tab shingle,
but people don't really install that one anymore. When I see a 3-tab shingle on a house, I can almost date it and say, hey, I know where you are, 10 to something years. But when I see an architectural shingle, those shingles are typically laminated. They last a little bit longer as long as the laminates stay there. And there's also other factors. What's the slope of the roof? If I see a roof that has literally no slope, I'm like, this thing is going to get it beaten. Snow is just going to stay here and just continue to find its way around in ice. Water expands 9% when it freezes. So if I know that your roof doesn't drain properly, and I know that it can freeze up and then thaw, I know every single time it gets broken down because ice will expand 9%. So when I look at the steepness of the roof, when I look at the material that it's used, that you're using for your roof, I can always give you one age. I kind of use like mean time to failure approach from an engineering perspective.
Mean time to failure.
When I look at the roof, I'm like, how long do you think you have before this roof starts to actually disintegrate to a point where you should be concerned? But I'm not going to say that there is one just absolute way to know. You're gonna have to train it's like data. You're gonna have to train yourself to put in that much data in your head, know some matrices, a little bit of science, be able to say, oh, I'm sure that you could do 10 years easily with what I'm seeing.
So as a home inspector, really what you're doing is you're drawing on your experience to look at say a roof, for example, or window. You make some estimations and suggestions, and then you leave that over to the client to make a decision on whether they want to replace it or proceed with the sale, or whatever purpose they had for that inspection.
Correct. And home inspection is also one arm of your due diligence. So I always say to sellers, to buyers, ask for documentation to validate something. In fact, in my report, let's be very honest, I put it there. I say guesstimated age.
Guesstimate, yeah.
I changed that thing from estimate.
I don't know if that word exists, but a lot of people...
That's my word that I coined.
I love that. Yeah,
guesstimated age. But trust me, when I guess, it's pretty accurate.
Yeah. So another item which often comes up is mold and flooding. Everybody asks, has the basement been flooded? And sometimes the insurance questionnaire, they get this questionnaire when they're applying for insurance, and it says, is the home in a floodplain or near a river or body of water?
Correct.
And then, of course, people get really spooked by that. Now, Nova Scotia is full of rivers and lakes. I mean, I don't know how many we've got. It's thousands of lakes.
Thousands, yeah.
Right. So, throw a stone, you're going to probably hit a lake. So, faced with these questions and the prospect of a home that's previously being flooded, and these homes are mostly made out of timber, if you come into a home, how do you determine, to put the buyer's mind at rest, how do you determine whether a home has been flooded? Or is there a way to determine that a home is previously flooded?
Yeah, so I mean, there are telltale signs. So I'm probably one of the only, if not the only home inspector that actually does mold testing.
Mold testing.
I actually do mold air testing and also mold bulk. I get calls from all over the province. I had someone wanting me to come keep breading different. I'm like, I can't, because when you just go on Google and put mold testing, I'm just going to show up first. That's one thing that is pure science, because what we do is I'll take a sample of the air, send it to the lab, and they'll tell me there's mold everywhere. So I find that this is a topic that I can talk for days on, just mold, because people assume that, there's no mold. Once you see any speck of any black thing in my house, I'm like, mold lives with us. We need mold. We need mold. So
part of the ecosystem.
Correct. The question is, do you have conditions for mold to start to thrive in your indoor space? Because when mold starts to thrive, and then it starts to spore. When it starts to spore, and then that's when you could start to have indoor air quality problems. So talking about whether you'll know if a house has been flooded before or not, then you have to start looking at the signs it leaves behind. So one of the ways I can typically know is go to the grain of any wood product touching the ground. Right. So let's say you have post, let's say you have your sole plate, whatever's touching the ground. If water has ever been, wood acts like a wick. So that's what we call the capillary action.
A sponge, basically a sponge.
A sponge, exactly. So at some point you'll see that, that tells you that at some point water has come in here and tried to creep in.
Even if it's just happened once?
No, even if it's just happened once, you will even if it dries out, you'll see that. But how many houses do you have these things exposed? Sometimes they're fully drywalled, floored, finished, except maybe you go into an older house that has some form of an unfinished basement. By itself, wood touching concrete is a defect technically. By itself, wood should never touch concrete. There should be a capillary break, like some synthetic material, like a plastic, a nylon, a film, a flashing. Wood should never really touch concrete. But because even if it doesn't flood and wood touches concrete, you'll still see the same signs, because concrete by itself is always moist.
Always holding moisture.
Always moist.
That's interesting to note.
Concrete is never really dry.
So technically a dry basement is not a dry basement.
100%.
Right.
The dry basement, I always tell people, keep your expectations realistic. Because you're in the ground. We're in the basement. It's like going to the zoo and expecting not to find an animal. Right. You're in the ground. I didn't know how fast I thought about that one. Yeah, that's good. You're in the ground. You're going deep in the ground, and you're expecting not to find moisture. You don't stop moisture. You control moisture.
Right.
So you tell the water, hey, I know you're in here, but this is where I want you to go to. So that's why when we build, and when you build a foundation, we have the perimeter drainage around the foundation, because builders know that there is water. But what they're saying to the water is, hey, here's your channel.
Go this way.
And take that exit. That's it.
Oh my gosh, I've seen buyers absolutely spooked when they see the channels. Like, why are there channels in the basement to channel the water?
Oh, that used to be the old way of doing. So you're talking about
yeah.
the internal channel,
Right?
But these days they put perforated pipes with crushed rock around the footing of
So
the
much
basement,
better, yeah.
and then it goes around. But my point is, when you build in the ground,
Yeah.
expect to have some water. So what you should have at the back of your mind is, how do I control the water? Not how do I stop, because you can't.
How do you
stop
control it? Absolutely.
Stop.
Also, there are often harmful things to watch out for. So things like asbestos and lead, which I believe were discontinued around about 1975,
Correct.
76. How do you check for those items during the course of a normal home inspection? Or is that an additional sort of inspection that the buyer can order?
So there are what we call the usual suspects.
Usual suspects. Okay.
Meaning that over time we know bad guys. So usually
Present company excluded.
Say that again.
Present company excluded.
So usually when I walk into a home, like a good home inspector should be able to spot some of all those historical asbestos type materials, 9x9 tiles, white insulation.
9x9 tiles.
Yeah,
right.
so there's some materials that we've known over, and these are usually.
Did you say white insulation?
Yeah, there's some white insulation, like even though it's wrapped in white. No, there's some insulation that's wrapped in white, and then you can see the yellow fiberglass. But there's some insulation that's wrapped in white, but also impregnated with white asbestos type.
Does
material.
it look like the sort of the pinkish insulation that we see, but it's white, or is it a different sort of consistency?
It's just gonna look like drywall.
It looks like drywall
Throughout the whole grain section.
Interesting.
It's just going to look like drywall white. So we know those type of stuff. So usually those are your pointers to asbestos, and then the age of the house too. But again, like I say, those are pointers for you to now start to look in certain areas. But again, I always like to point out, not everything is alarming. People need more information than fear, meaning that asbestos by itself isn't a problem. Sometimes I like to go to the history of why asbestos was discontinued was discontinued as a building material. It wasn't really about homeowners. It was about miners.
About the mining, yeah.
They were going in there to mine this material, and these guys were having so many millisieverts of dosage of...
Right.
And it was killing them. It was giving them cancer. So folks said, hey, how do we make people continue mining this material that's killing them? So it's not because a material in the house that's not damaged. It's not
undisturbed,
friable, undisturbed. It's not. It's not throwing out fibers.
No,
it absolutely does nothing. So if you had 9x9 tiles in your house that you thought were asbestos, install flooring over it, and you'll be 100% fine. So again, people have to just have the right understanding of what these materials are, the true implication or any possible implication, and then be informed. Because I've seen people really miss good deals of
over the fear of that, or not understanding
word mold, that word asbestos, that word lead. It's just a bit being a bit more informed about the true.
We actually found a lead feed in a recent home we inspected in the city. It was an older home, and it was very short distance, probably about 15 meters. The front of the home was close to the street. So the lead pipe, the main feed, was coming from the municipal side, from the city to the house. And then just where it was coming up, the main feed to the house, the pipe then changed to the regular PVC and copper and all of that. But that lead pipe was discovered. So they had to apply you can apply to the city for them to pay for that.
Correct.
But you've got to pay first, and then the city will reimburse you. And they could be.
That's if you want it done right away. The city does already have a schedule to replace all lead supply pipes.
Right.
But let's say at some point you want it done right away. Yeah.
Right.
There is a procedure for you to go right ahead and do it, and then the city reimburses you. So again, lead is known to be a developmental issue with kids, but you're grown now. You're developed.
Oh, I grew up with lead pipes.
We did, right? Even some.
Maybe it explains a lot.
Even some copper pipes have lead. People don't realize because the sodas were made of lead.
Any type of metal, I would imagine, or even the PVC, anything that breaks down and gets into your system would at some point be harmful to you, I would imagine.
But lead is kind of known, but lead was used as soda for copper. But again,
Right. So it's still getting in.
it's
the
still
lead
getting
solver.
in from the hot water. That's why they tell you
Right.
sometimes run your faucet a little bit longer before you fetch from it if
Okay.
you have or you suspect that you have lead
Lead
pipes.
pipe. Can you filter out the lead?
You
Is there-
can.
is
There
a
are
filter
lead
out?
filters. There are lead filters.
Just the standard sort of brighter, the brighter ones that they sell in the
They're
supermarket.
specific. They usually have because every material has it's to the microns and it's to the size of what
Yeah.
you're trying to filter out. But they're usually specific filters that are specific for lead filtering.
For lead. Okay, fantastic. Another favorite, and you could speak to this one, is sewer lines and sewer line checks. And I know that you do these. We've had some fun with these.
I know.
Yeah, so a couple of weeks ago, we found one where there was a tree root as thick as
Yeah.
the actual pipe, almost as thick as the actual pipe, the outlet. So there was no way anything was going to get through there.
Go through it, right?
So the only solution was to, of course, excavate. I mean,
Right.
that was not going to be a cheap solution for the
Right.
buyer. So what are the kinds of things to look out for when you're doing a sewer line test? And what is the importance of doing the sewer line test?
So here's the importance for me. I always put it simply when I explain to realtors and their clients. I always say one thing. I say, hey, do you know that sewer line is one thing you have no idea about? You don't have to be a home inspector to have an idea about the look, feel, age, condition of the house. You know this. When you get into a house, sometimes you're only waiting for Michael to come say, can you come validate some of the things I'm seeing? Why? Because you see it. But guess what about the sewer line? No idea.
Right.
So, I mean, you rightly mentioned, I do have some properties myself. If I was going to buy a property right now today with all that I know about properties, I do a sewer line because
Right.
that's the only thing I realize I have no clue about, because right there in that ground, sewer line pipe materials have changed over the years. At some point, they started with clay. What was the problem with clay? Clay was
The original sort of 1800s.
Still have
kind of
it.
thing,
We
yeah.
still have it all the time. You couldn't
Right.
change all the pipes in Halifax downtown. We still have. I still see clay pipes in Halifax
Okay.
downtown. It is brittle. The joints aren't watertight, so
Right.
trees can find their way and
Oh,
get
that's not good.
into the pipe.
Right.
But the good thing again about clay is it can be easily relined. So when you're going to buy a house, I always usually recommend that you at least do a sewer line, because you know why? The infrastructure from the house to where it meets the city, or at
Yeah.
least if there's a walkway there, so at least the walkway or whatever the setback is,
Yeah.
that small portion actually belongs to you. And if anything were to go wrong there, you have to start by digging. And you guys, we know nothing's really cheap
And
to
that's
do
on,
these
that's
days.
on you. That cost is on you.
And that's on you. So that's why you really want to check that one and make sure that it is good. There's cracks.
How do you, you mentioned relining the pipe.
Yeah.
Do you need to excavate, or is there a way you
No,
can reline
cured
that
in
pipe
place.
without
So it's called a
excavating?
SIP. With the SIP is a cured in place pipe. So meaning that, so when you hear the word cured, it means that at some point it's liquid and then it cures and solidifies just like concrete. So they roll it up like a sock, roll it all up, and then they put it at the start of the pipe, and then they kind of blow it through, and then the thing kind of spreads out the length of the pipe, whatever length they want. And after a while, it cures, and then it turns into a solid pipe, and that's how that's how pipe are typically. But guess what? A lot of people have asked me, can you reline no corrode, which is the black stuff that is bitumen based? The answer is no. There's one rule for
You can't do it.
relining.
Yeah.
You can't reline a pipe that has a structural problem.
Okay. That's good to know. And you wouldn't have to do all the excavation work
No.
if you can simply reline the pipe.
That's right.
That's a huge cost saving. You mentioned back there something about pipes bursting as
Pipe
well.
burst. So that's another interesting
Yeah.
pipe rehabilitation technique. So what they do is, let's say they wanted to reline 10 meter of pipe. They go to 0 meter and they go to 10 meter. They dig a trench, just a hole in the ground.
Yeah.
And then they take this HDPE pipe or any type of flexible pipe, and then they pull it through. But you know what they do? They put a big head in front of it that's like a big metal. So what the metal is doing is, as it pulls through, like the mouth of a pencil, the small end goes
Yeah.
through, but the bigger part starts to burst the pipe.
Right.
That's why it's called pipe burst.
Pipe
so it's
burst.
bursting the pipe. But as it's bursting the pipe, you know what it's bringing along? The new one.
The new pipe.
So the new one just comes. So by the time the head of the equipment gets to the other end, the whole original pipe is busted, but there's a new pipe in there too at the same time. That one's pretty
That's
cool.
fantastic. The technology is really good.
Trenchless piping these days.
Transverse piping. So we're just going through a list of the items, the main items which come up, and one of them which frequently comes up, I often get questions about this from our buyers, is the foundations of a property, foundation cracks. Where are the foundation cracks? The type, are they lateral cracks? Are they along sort of the brickwork in line with the mortar? And how that affects things like radon getting in, water, moisture.
Correct.
How would you answer a buyer's fears around seeing cracks in the foundation, or what recommendations would you make to them based on the type of cracks they would see?
I mean, I wish these were easy questions, and at some point I probably will teach, because a lot of people have said I might be able to teach, because most of the way I do my work, which you know about me, is I don't scratch the surface. Like I get into the details. So as simple as cracks sound, they're not that simple. So number one, in the industry, we always say there's only two types of concrete foundation, one with crack and one that hasn't yet cracked. Yeah. Meaning that cracks can be a typical stuff. But the question is, how much crack? When does it become a problem? How's the crack oriented? Is it a straight line crack? Is there an angle? Because from a science perspective, when I see a crack, the first thing I'm trying to figure out is, what are the forces at play? That's the first thing you need to figure out. And in what direction are the forces at play? If the forces at play are going this way, then you're saying, hey, what's happening and causing these forces to go this way? Or what's happening this way? Now, this way is the settlement, typical settlement, which gives you the straight line kind of crack.
Right.
This other way, or diagonally, starts to give you a diagonal kind of crack. And this way, back and forth, is the worst. That gives you your horizontal crack. So in the end, I'm not really fazed by cracks in the foundation. No, I mean, I've seen buyers who will go crazy and say, hey, there's a crack, I'm not going to buy the house. No, there's always cracks. There's always cracks. The question is, what's the orientation of the crack? Well, you know that already. Horizontal cracks are the cracks you don't want to see, because when you have a foundation, you only want one force to act, which is the force that's what setting the house on top of the foundation. And that's what the foundation is supposed to do anyway. But when you start to have forces acting horizontally, now that means you're making the foundation do this. Right. And the foundation wasn't designed to move in that way. And that's where you have the horizontal cracks. So when we see horizontal cracks, we don't like it, because we know that there's a problem in there. There's something going on. So, but when we see horizontal cracks, now the question is how thick it is. Engineers will have something called a glass block, because a glass block is going to measure the exact thickness. And a glass block you can glue a glass block on a foundation. It's almost like a tempered screen. Good.
Right.
Screen tempering. Let's say you put a tempered screen on your phone. When the phone falls, what happens to the
cracks?
Exactly. So that's what a glass block is like. If I put a glass block on a crack and I come back and the glass block has cracked, it tells me that you're still moving. And that's also what we don't like. So what we like is you have a relatively thin crack that has stopped moving, the house has settled, and that's how it will be. Now let's talk about cracks and letting water in. Honestly, that's a myth.
Okay. That's
a myth. It'll sound like an unpopular opinion, but that's a myth. The crack isn't why the water is getting in. The crack is telling you that your water drainage isn't working.
Right. Okay.
So because if you have a crack in your foundation somehow, a small crack, and water is able to get in, it means that water is there. And if water is there, it means that your foundation drainage isn't letting the water go. It's like having a 1 horsepower pump and having a 1/3 horsepower pump. If the 1/3 horsepower pump is catching something, it means your 1 horsepower isn't doing what it should do. So it means that if somehow you're getting water into your house from a small crack, it means that big 4-inch or 3-inch pipe isn't letting the water go where it's supposed to go. So for me, in my own properties or in my house, if I see water getting in from a foundation crack, I'm more worried about. And it happened recently. I had a project that I had to put in a basement walkout, and then we got to the footing, and then we got to the point where we wanted to tie a drain to the foundation drain, and then the guys just tied it in. So I came because I was managing the project, and I'm saying, guys, did you flood test the foundation drain? It's like, no. I'm like, nope, we're going to flood test that foundation drain. So we got the garden hose, and then we put the water in the foundation drain. Nowhere. So what I asked the guy to do was, you know what we're going to do? We're going to build a sump pump on the other side, and we're going to put a 2-inch pipe beneath the footing and link the outside to the inside. And Boom, it worked. Guess what? The cracks are still there. Zero water
and
in
no
the
water
house.
getting in. So for folk that see the cracks and decide they want to patch them, that's not solving the problem. You've got to solve it at the
At your drainage. It's usually a drainage problem, not really. It's like saying, it's always interesting. When I had a neighbor like that, he moved into my area. So he's like, what is getting in? So I told him the same story. He wouldn't believe me. He still wanted to spend the money and do the stuff. So he removed the whole foundation, the whole drywall, and said he was going to patch the crack. Next day, he knocks at my door, says, Michael, there's like 14 other cracks. I laughed so hard.
I wonder if he's listening.
He should be listening. I laughed so hard because I try to explain. The point is this: your drainage doesn't work. There are always these tiny hair-like cracks in the house. It's not what's letting your basement get flooded or flooding your basement. It's the fact that you are not sending water that's around your foundation away from the house. And guess what? We were next door neighbors. I have cracks in my foundation. He has cracks in his foundation. He's getting flooded.
He's getting the water.
I'm not.
Yeah. So solve the water problem. Absolutely. And then lastly, you don't find too much of this in the city, but you and I have certainly done a few well and septics together.
I do so many things.
You do so many things. For buyers who are more familiar with municipal services, we just pay the bill every month and the water's there and we don't even think about flushing the toilet. That's all taken care of.
Right.
But when you're slightly outside of the city, now you're dealing with water that comes out of the ground. You have to manage your own water. And you also have septic systems where your waste has to be managed.
Treated on-site. On-site waste disposal system.
So what are the main things you find, perhaps let's start with wells. What are the main things you find with wells, perhaps starting with the differences between a dug and a drilled well, and things like, I would say, bacteria and minerals that we need to watch out for and test for?
The most basic thing between dug, drill well is how you're getting your water source. When you drill way down beneath bedrock to go find aquifer water that's almost, volume is substantially higher than what you get from dug well that's mostly perched water that depends on the water table.
Right.
So, but then while you're down there getting more volumes, you're also getting more dissolved minerals. So that's when you're starting to find manganese, uranium, and all those dissolved metals in the water. So you find that drilled water tends to have more dissolved minerals. But right at the surface, which typically will be the same constituent of water in like lakes or water bodies, they tend to have less dissolved minerals. But now they have more tendency to have E. coli, bacteria. So, and then the volume, I've heard people say, hey, what do you call it? They wanted to test the recovery of dog wells. It doesn't, it's just the water table. You either have water or you don't. Funny enough, I back home in Nigeria, where I'm originally from, we did have dog wells. And every couple of years, you had to dig deeper, to get more water. It is what it is. So you have water, great. If you don't, you go deeper or you find another source. And as with septic systems, you do have your own private disposal system now. So the whole idea is there's something in science called the hydrological cycle. It just, science just ties up. Like I could talk about science forever because it almost relates to matter is not created nor destroyed, meaning that everything around us revolves. So that same water that you flush in your toilet, right, goes to the septic tank. From the septic tanks, it goes into your field. Hopefully you have a field that's not polluting the environment, and then it gets treated properly. At some point, it goes back to the lake.
Right.
Or at some point, it gets evaporated and goes back to the sky. And then when it becomes laden up there in the sky, it comes back to us at rain. So you might be shitting on yourself. I hope we're not shitting on ourselves. So that's the importance
Well, thank you. I didn't have that thought in my head, but I'm always going to think about that now.
That's the importance of having a septic system that's not polluting the environment. So the whole idea of septic treatment is we're trying to use the characteristics of sand as basic filtration we learnt in school. So it goes through, and there's also the anaerobic process. There's a little bit of science in there, but the whole idea is when I pass black water or gray water or effluent, we call them effluent. This is water from wastewater that needs to be treated. When I pass it through at least 1 meter of sand that has a specific characteristics, because it lets it flow at a specific speed, it starts to filter it over that time. Microbes, bacteria starts to work on it, and then at some point it becomes 99% clean and then can join the water. So when I'm testing a septic system, I'm really checking that you're not sending that effluent to any type of sending it out prematurely. That's what I find most of the time. I'm loading the system with some water in here. I have some dye in it, and all of a sudden I'm seeing that same dye here. It means that, bro, you're shitting on us all.
You don't want to see the dye.
Correct. I don't want to see the dye. And that just gives me a fair idea. I mean, it's not 100% foolproof method, but at least I'm convinced at that point that I've done my best to make sure that you're not directly just polluting the environment.
So you probably found, especially with the much older homes, like way back in the day, like over 100 years ago, sometimes they'd use a straight pipe with nothing to filter that. They'd literally just pump that out.
It happens occasionally. Some areas are more suspect.
Some areas are more suspect.
Some areas are more suspect. So they just put it down to the drain channel in front of the house, and if it's raining, no one knows. It just flows and goes. But ideally, we kind of see that a lot.
Yeah, I think they've changed the law now quite a while back that you've actually got to put in something. If you find something with a straight pipe system, you've got to install some sort of system to manage the waste.
It usually borders on responsibility. It's never really been allowed, but if there's no enforcement and no one's finding this type of stuff, well, people can decide to turn a blind eye. And if you're living in a community where literally everyone's doing it, you might ask yourself. So usually it's a responsibility thing. It's how you feel as a person. If you feel like you need to do right as a person, then you should go right ahead and fix it. But there's also complications to it, because if you're going to put a legit septic system, then you have lot size requirements. And let's say you never knew. You see, it ties back to why you should do a proper home inspection. So let's say you never knew. You went and bought a 3,000 square feet lot or a 4,000 square feet lot that wasn't even big enough to have a legit septic field. You didn't do no inspections. You bought it. Somewhere along the line, you find that you're leaching to the surface, and now you're trying to put a septic system in. You're going to have a problem.
Do you know the minimum size required to have a septic
I don't have
system?
it in my head, but there's a minimum lot size requirement for selectable systems. Now, I will get complicated, because selectable system means that there are two people who can select a system. There is a QP and there's an engineer. The QP can select systems we call selectable, meaning that there's a book of known systems that you can use. But when things get rough or things get tricky, now you need an engineer, because he's going to deviate from those selectable systems to be able to accommodate you. So let's say we're talking about that 4,000 square feet lot that's a 4-bedroom, and you can't fit in a selectable system there. You got to talk to the engineer, and the engineer will have to redesign something. Maybe you're now playing towards the engineered systems, the ATU, advanced treatment units, and they get a bit pricier. So
there is a way to do it on the smaller lot. You've just got to.
There is always a way.
Okay, that's good to know.
It's more expensive.
So I feel like we could talk so much on all of these points. There's just so much.
I know.
And I've been dying to get to this question, and that's I know a little bit about it, because one day we were going to go to dinner, and you mentioned you were washing your motorcycles. So I want to know,
we're going to talk about this.
Yes, this is coming out now. What do you do in your spare time for leisure? How do you take a break from all the home inspections?
I do. You know already, I do ride motorcycles. At some point, I had 4, so I'm kind of a toy guy. Like, I'd probably not buy nice dresses before I will buy. I'll probably buy a motorcycle before I buy a nice shirt or shoe. And I'm a bit of. I like to fix stuff. So one of my hobbies, funny enough, is just buying quotes junk stuff from Facebook Market and just fix it at home. So I like to fix motorcycles, I like to fix electronics, I just like to fix. And then I also have started to like to travel, so a little bit. So I usually will hang out with some of my old-time buddies from university. Sometimes we'll hang out. So if I'm not working, which is hard these days, like
Yeah.
which is hard these days, it gets really busy. I like to spend time with family too, very important for me. And I like my motorcycles, and I like my screwdrivers, my multimeter,
Okay.
and all my gizmos I use for repairing stuff. And I'm pretty much a hands-on guy. I'm always up to one project or another. Or I'm probably building a unit. Sometimes I can spend time I could build a basement unit myself. Like I have some of those type of projects I do, like when the market gets really slow, like say the dead of winter. Sometimes I just look for a small project that I can play with.
Constructively occupied. So Mike, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been so good to find out a little bit more about you. I'll speak for a lot of other realtors out there who've worked with you. Maybe they didn't have as much insight to who
I
you
know,
are.
right?
Maybe
I really set my pride with this. There's lots of people who work with me. I probably don't know as much as you know about me.
If they want to use your home inspection services, Ace Tech, what is the best way they can contact you? Do you want to give them your number, and they can, or the best way to reach you?
So the best way to reach me will be via my website. I've designed my website in such a way that you can go on there, schedule an inspection. It does have my calendar. Unfortunately, right now, it's just me, so I'm not able to take all the calls, respond to all the text messages. But the easiest way to catch me will be through my website, acetechhomeinspections.ca. To book, it will be /schedule, and you can book an inspection. You could call me. If I'm available, I'll take that call. I like to take your call, and I'm happy to answer questions. One thing I do a lot is answer questions. I have a lot of people who call me and just have questions, and I'm always happy to answer it and educate people, because even though information is out there, I mean, quality, good, validated information is hard to find, and that's something I really enjoy doing. And that probably takes me back to the fact that I might teach. So if you're looking to reach out to me, Acetech Home Inspections /CA/schedule 9028-223. Give me a call, text message, or however you can find me.
Thank you, Mike. Really appreciate having you on today. Thanks. You so much.
Take care.
Have a good day.